the basic rules are very simple. I'm going to try to keep this to an hour and a half, folks, because I know it's dinner time and I'm ready to eat. 2-minute opener per candidate, 2-minute closer at the end of the evening. In between, we'll have 5 questions from the board of directors of the association and about 20 minutes of questions from the audience. We've got a nice big stack of them already. So that's the way it's going to be. And each question put to the candidates, you're only going to have a minute to respond, so you better get right to the point. Okay. Now, there's a couple of elected officials I want to recognize as well. Gentleman from the Parish Commission, Matthew Lynn, and Mike Middleton. Am I leaving anyone out?
Oliver.
Oh, Barrow Peacock is here, our state senator. Thank you, Barrow. Oh, I left someone else out. Who else?
Oliver.
Oh, Oliver Jenkins, I'm sorry. Oliver is our incumbent councilman. Okay. Now, if there's no further ado, I think we'll get started. And one more thing I want to say. We need to give credit to the church for being our host for 30 years. Okay, so I have been informed we have 1, 2, and 3, Mr. Karstensen, Mr. Nicholson, Mr. Curtin. And we're going to go in that order for their opening statements, 2 minutes each. Mr. Karstensen.
We've got to recognize that we reap what we sow. When we look at the direction the city's been going for the last 30, 40 years, we've got to understand that there's a causal reason that this is happening. We've elected officials who care very much. They speak very well on the microphone, but they're not making our city a better place, they're not making it a safer place, and they're not getting our economy in gear. We've got to understand what's going on in order to be able to sow the right seed next time around. Forgot my opening speech. Sorry, folks. I'm not a good public speaker. I love this city. I'm from Shreveport native. Lived most of my life in District C or B. And I've, with my own eyes, I've watched it decay. And there's trash on the ground now. It just looks run down. It's not like it used to be in the pictures that I see from my parents' photo albums. And I'd like to help it get back to that. I'd like to help it get beyond that. There's a new generation coming online now, the millennials, that most of us aren't running for office yet. But we feel like we deserve a seat at the table. We feel like our interests should be fairly represented. Everyone's interests should be fairly represented. And I think that would be a very good candidate to be able to do that. Thank you.
Mr. Nicholson, I forgot to let you guys know that Janie's going to hold up a yellow card when you've got 10 seconds left and a red one when you're out of time.
Good evening. My name is John Nicholson. I was born and raised in Shreveport. My wife Emily and I have been married 17 years. We have 4 children. Our oldest just started high school at Magnet. We've got 2 at South Highlands, and their baby brother has 1 more year of preschool. So we're covering all the bases academically this year. Emily and I met in high school and started dating. I followed her to TCU. I finished school a year early to save money. I taught high school for a year while I waited for Emily to finish, and after she graduated, we got married and moved to Virginia so that I could attend law school there. After I graduated, I began my career as a lawyer at a large firm in Dallas, clerked for a year for a federal appellate judge, and then came home in time for our oldest child to start preschool here and to be raised with her grandparents down the street. We came home because we love this city and we wanted to make a life here. When we arrived 10 years ago from Houston, the economy was booming, largely as a consequence of the Haynesville Shale, and things in many ways were looking up. Everybody in this room knows that we have suffered some substantial decline over the past decade. We've seen it reported that we've lost 5% of our population during that time period. We're all aware of what seem like nearly nightly shootings in this community that are reported on the news. And we know that the city is not moving in the right direction. In the past 10 years, I have been civically engaged in a number of ways. I've served as, I see my red card, and so I'm going to cut my remarks off, but I will say I've been engaged, and I look forward to sharing my thoughts with the city with you this evening. Thanks.
I'm going to stand up if you don't mind, so I can see everybody. Hi, I want to thank you all for being here tonight. My name is Patrick Curtin, and I'm a proud Broadmoor resident. As a matter of fact, I live down the street at 1034 East Kings Highway. And anybody that knows East Kings Highway knows that there are two monstrously large white colonial mansions right there. Well, I'm that tiny house sandwiched in between them. So, I want to introduce my wife Susan, my son Eric, my beautiful mother-in-law Maureen Mason, who is the oldest living president of the Shreveport Real Estate Association, at 94 years old and a longtime Broadmoor resident. She's living with us now and we love having her. Last year I started a small grassroots campaign to help out Mr. and Miss George at Deli Casino. You know, that road construction project was killing their business. And I was so inspired by the outpouring of support from our community to help these fine people. As a matter of fact, it saved their business. It made me realize and acknowledge that there are really good people here. And it also made me realize if that's the least I can do to help someone, what's the most I can do to help someone? So I talked it over with my wife and my kids, and we realized that this is the perfect time for me to step up and try to make a difference. I'm just like you. I am your neighbor. I love Shreveport. It saddens me to see so many people on a daily basis on social media ridicule and put down our city. They think it's a lost cause. They've given up. They think any idea of fixing it is a lost cause. Well, if we give up, it is a lost cause. And I'm not one to give up. I love this town. It's where I grew up. It's where I raised my family. And it's where I intend to stay. And it would be my honor and privilege to represent each and every one of you as your city council.
Okay, we're done with the opening statements, so we're going to go into 5 questions from the association, 1-minute response per candidate. And Rob, help me out. Are we starting with Mr. Karstensen? Mr. Nicholson, okay. And then it'll go to Mr. Curtin and finally Mr. Karstensen, and then we'll keep that same rotation going throughout. Hope I can remember that. Broadmoor has been showing up at the top or near the top of recent Shreveport police crime statistics. This has many residents worried and concerned. As a member of the City Council, what would you do to make our area safe?
I appreciate this question because public safety has got to be our top priority going forward. If we are not safe in our own homes and on our own streets, nothing else matters. That's the first responsibility of the government. First, we've got to take care of the men and women who take care of us. The starting salary for a Shreveport police officer now is $33,000, which is thousands of dollars less than Bossier across the river, and far less than what they can make in East Texas and in some parts of Arkansas. We've got a $488 million operating budget in this city, and we can find the money to pay them fairly. Second, we have got to coordinate and cooperate with the United States Attorney and with the Caddo Parish Sheriff. I was concerned, as I'm sure you all were, when the administration recently declined Sheriff Prater's invitation for assistance. And finally, we've got to have a zero tolerance policy for gun crimes and violent criminals. We have to prioritize getting dangerous offenders off the street. Thank you.
I agree with what Mr. Nicholson said. I'm going to break it down to our district. There are 13 crime districts in this city. In our district, 1 out of 4 crimes for shoplifting. 1 out of 5 crimes in this city are theft from auto. 1 out of 6 total crimes happen in this district. So what can we do? I think we should really support our social media neighborhood watch sites. I think they are doing a wonderful job. I think the city needs to support them and offer assistance to make them more efficient. I really appreciate the people that man those sites. And I would be up for talking with the mayor to up our patrols in this district. I had somebody arrested outside my house about 3 weeks ago. So I would love to see more patrol, and I will talk to the mayor about it.
This is a main issue for me. This has affected my family extremely personally. And one thing that I want to be very clear about is that the things that go into crimes being committed are not the Department of the Police. The police is law enforcement. Okay, crime prevention and law enforcement are two different things. We have to understand what's causing the crime in the first place. There's a lot of people who are down and out. A lot of people who don't have a light at the end of the tunnel. Well, that's how a person gets to feeling right before they commit a crime. I agree with Mr. Nicholson that we need to have a zero tolerance for violent crime. In particular, we need to focus on violent crime. We have all kinds of crime all over the place. But the crime that's preventing people from moving here, the crime that's causing people to move away from here, is the violent crime. If that takes taking resources away from the enforcement of other things to focus it on detectives, I'm sorry. That's what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates. Concrete streets in our area are breaking up and appear to be nearing or exceeding their useful lifespan. Traditional financing for major street improvements usually involves a bond issue. Would you support this method, or do you have another solution?
Well, as you know, our streets are crumbling, and what's under the streets is crumbling even faster. This problem really evolved over several administrations. You kick the can down the street because it wasn't a really sexy project for them to deal with. I think a lot of mayors would rather have their name on a building somewhere. This is a problem. I think that this mayor has started to tackle that. I don't think the money will go far enough that they have allocated, but we do need to come up with long-term solutions to make sure that we have continual upgrades and updates to our infrastructure so that we don't get into a position like we are now, because to fix everything we need to do, it'd be about $1 billion. Shreveport doesn't have that. So we really need to sit down and prioritize and find out where that money's going to come from.
If we can fix the street without a bond issue, let's do that. If we can't, I guess we'll have to use a bond issue. Roads are a very big deal. People have expensive cars. Those cars get torn up on these rough roads. It doesn't make people want to move here. But frankly, the city spends money very frivolously. I seriously doubt that we need a bond issuance to really deal with that. I think that we can clean up the way that the different departments work and find the money to fix the roads.
We're suffering the consequences of a generation of infrastructure neglect. I don't see any way to complete the repairs and infrastructure maintenance that needs to be done without an additional bond issue. The money's not there otherwise, and I think any member of the council or administration that suggests otherwise is just mistaken. We've got to make that investment, because if we don't have an infrastructure that can support the economy that we need to grow and thrive, we'll never have that economy. So yes, I do think a bond issue is necessary to address the neglect that we see all around us. Thanks.
Okay. Can you describe the city's method of enforcing property standards, and would you make changes? Mr. Karstensen goes first.
Can I describe it? Not very well. Not good enough. You said property standards? Property standards are extremely important because that's where the curb appeal of the city comes from. Codes are also important. It's another thing that plays into that. Property standards are pretty bad, especially in your lower income areas. People don't have the extra spendable cash to reinvest in their home and make it look as good as possible. I think we could work with people in the lower end of the income spectrum and enforce more judiciously in the areas where people can afford it.
We all know that the blight that results from poor property enforcement standards is a significant problem. Yards that are not cut, windows that are broken. I'll tell you, I have an office downtown, and I walk to do my banking at the Regions Tower about every week or so, and I walk by a plate glass window that at eye level that has been broken for 18 months. Presumably the owner of that enormous skyscraper has the ability to fix that window, but it hasn't been made to do so. The city has officials and employees that are charged with enforcing property standards. We need to allocate additional funds to that effort, and we need to make sure that standards are consistently enforced. Mr. Carstensen, of course, is correct that there are occasions on which property owners do not have the means to maintain their property, but there are also many occasions in which property owners, absentee landowners sometimes, do have the means to maintain their property and simply choose not to do so. We can't tolerate that. We all deserve better, and we've got to make that a priority as well.
You know, you look around the city and you see a poor lack of attention to property standards. And we've got to find a way to polish up our image, to give our city a greater sense of pride. If we're going to attract businesses, that's got to be a priority. I know the mayor had to keep it classy, don't be trashy, bumper stickers, and that articulated a message. We need to articulate a plan with some teeth in it. I've been doing some research around the country to see what other towns are doing to combat this, because I've had meetings with the property standards downtown. You look at the list of all the steps they have to do to enforce property standards violations, and it can get bogged down for months before anything gets done. Baton Rouge is starting something that they're calling Blight Court, and I have a call into the mayor to talk to her next week to find out how that's working. It basically fast tracks. That's all they do is talk about property standards and blight issues. And I want to call down there and find out how's that working, give me the specifics, and I think that's an opportunity that I think we really should explore.
The city of Shreveport is heavily reliant on outside advisors for advice on public finance, such as issuing bonds for capital improvements. What experience do you have in reviewing budgets, balance sheets, and other financial information?
As I mentioned during my opening statement, in the decade that I've been home, I have served on the boards of directors of several civic organizations. I've served on the board of directors of the Shreveport Bar Foundation, which owns the Shreveport Bar Center and runs a pro bono program that provides free legal assistance to members of our community who otherwise would not be able to afford a lawyer. I'm a past president of that organization. I also have served on the board of directors and am presently the treasurer of Christian Service, which operates a facility that provides food and clothing to people in need in our community. I am a member of the Finance Council of the Cathedral of St. John Berkman's and the trustee of that church. And I have served for many years as a member of the board of directors of Louisiana Right to Life, which has a significant budget, and also as a member of the board of governors of the Bar Association of the Federal Fifth Circuit. So I have extensive experience in that regard. Thank you.
Yeah, what he said? No. I have been taking a lot of meetings with people, gearing up for my learning campaign to get ready for my job in city government. I have spoken with people in town who do write bonds. I'll be honest, I am educating myself, but in my personal life, in my professional life, I have worked with advertising budgets where people have $1 million advertising budgets. And we talk, the advertising agencies, myself, the business owners, talk to find the best use of those advertising dollars to help and how to spend them wisely. I think that the more education that I will get on this subject, I'm going to tell you, I don't know it all, but I'm learning. But I have worked with budgets, and I do look forward to learning more about this issue.
Only budget I have experience with is my personal budget, which I run very, very, very tightly. I go to Whataburger and they ask me if I want cheese on it, and I know it costs 60 cents, so I tell them no. Now, I am very, very good at not spending money frivolously. When times are tight, when pickings are slim, I don't spend my money frivolously. I think that if I keep my mind on the needs of the city and keep with my typical frugalness that defines part of my character, I think I'll be all right with the budget.
Okay, last question from the association directly, and then we'll launch into the public part of the program. What issue do you think is most important to Council District C, and how would you deal with it? We'll start with Mr. Curtin.
I think if I polled everybody in this room, 90% of you would say the crime in this district. That's something that, there's a long-term solution and there's a short-term solution. I think short-term solution, we've got to find a way to give the police officers what they need. There are, you've heard the number, there's about 150 police officers that are on the street at any time, any day of the week. We break that out into 3 8-hour shifts. There are times we have maybe 40 police officers patrolling the streets in Shreveport. I think that we have officers who are starving for good leadership from their chief. I think that they need a police chief they can respect and who will have a workable plan. And I think that crime in Broadmoor will be our #1 issue. Gotcha, Janie. I'm shutting it down. Thank you.
I agree with Mr. Curtin. Crime is easily the biggest issue in District C. Now, Shreveport has always had disproportionately high crime rates, always, since I've been alive. Now, the crime rates in District C recently have gone through the roof. And not just crime in general, but violent crime. We're seeing a lot of theft, we're seeing a lot of vandalism, and a lot of violent crime. It's making people afraid. If you look at the Broadmoor group on Facebook, crime is the hot topic. Same thing in Ingersnell and same thing in Shreveport. Clearly the people understand that crime is the major issue. Like I said before, it's a complicated issue. It requires a nuanced, comprehensive solution, including long-term and short-term aspects. So we'll get to talk about more crime on that.
Like Mr. Curtin and Mr. Carsonson, I believe crime is the most serious issue facing both District C and Shreveport as a whole. As I mentioned just a few minutes ago, I think we've got to increase the pay of our law enforcement officers so that we can retain them and treat them fairly. We've got to make sure that they have the resources that they need to do their job. We need to make sure that the resources allocated to law enforcement as a whole are spent efficiently and well. There's been much discussion from the mayoral candidates and others about the fact that we have far fewer officers on patrol as opposed to behind a desk than is optimal. We have to coordinate with other law enforcement partners in the community, including the United States Attorney and the Sheriff. And again, we've got to have a zero tolerance policy for violent crime. If a person commits a shooting or another violent act, they need to go to jail and they need to stay there.
Okay, now it's time for the questions from the audience, and I would like to allot 20 minutes to that section. Ken, would you help me with that? Okay. Interstate 49 ends at Interstate 20 and begins again at Interstate 220, and there's a gap of 3 to 4 miles, 3.6 miles. Do you support completing Interstate 49 through the inner city?
No. Folks, this is a very, very great example of typical Shreveport politics. Okay, if we look at it from a political standpoint, we have a bunch of people who are fearing for the future of their neighborhood. And whenever they cry out for that, their words fall on deaf ears, and you have people unequivocally suggesting that somehow building that street is going to be the thing that saves our economy, which is, in my opinion, nonsense. The extension of I-49 that's there now didn't save our economy. What makes us think a little bit longer one will? I think that it's a perfect example of something that we need to be diplomatic about and understanding about, understand what the other side thinks. And if there's any validity to the idea that it is going to help our economy, I'd like to see it, and I'd like for that evidence to be readily distributed to the people so that we can decide intelligently whether that's a good idea or not.
I certainly respect and sympathize with property owners whose homes and businesses are in the path of the proposed completion of Interstate 49. It's never easy to be told by the government that they're going to build an interstate through your property. But I do believe completing Interstate 49 is important to our economy. I think it's something that needs to happen and will happen. Every consideration should be given to the concerns of the property owners with respect to the specific route, but we cannot fail to complete that project because the property owners would prefer that it not be completed. That is an issue that has to be dealt with every time a road is built in this community, in this state, in this country, and it's something that needs to happen here, not here.
Well, I'm going to tell you that's a tough decision that has to be made. I do agree that connecting I-49 is vital, but that's a historic part of town, and those are people's lives. I would really love to see if there could be an alternative. I know that there have been a lot of studies, but if we really want to unify Shreveport and stop dividing Shreveport, I think we need to take a real hard look at that. So I'm going to be honest and tell you, I don't have an answer. I do see that it needs to be done, but we're talking about a historic neighborhood and people's livelihoods. And I'd love to go tour that part of town just to kind of look and see what options could be done. Thank you.
The Metropolitan Planning Commission has been in the news in the last few years. The commission was set up to be a semi-autonomous entity serving both the city and the parish. Lately, there's been a move on the part of the city council to bring planning duties directly under the city government and divorce from the MPC. Do you support that?
I am not prepared at this stage to support the elimination of the Planning Commission. Mr. Sweeney and the rest of the commission, I think, did a very competent job of getting the Unified Development Code in place. Everyone involved in that process knew that there would be some bumps in the road and that modifications to the commission, the plan would have to be made. But I think it is not time to abandon the Metropolitan Planning Commission yet. That's my point. Thanks.
You know, I've heard so many stories of people who had nightmares working with the Metropolitan Planning Commission. We look at our neighbors across the river, and the government agencies are working together and helping each other, and they're welcoming businesses in, and they're getting them going, while we're still putting up roadblocks, pretty much, it seems, at every turn. I don't know that I would recommend completely eliminating the MPC, but there's got to be a lot of work done there. We have got to find a way to streamline the process because they are causing people to go to Bossier to open up businesses. They don't want to be here to deal with that. And I just think it's something we need to streamline.
I agree with Mr. Nicholson on this one. I'm not ready to get rid of the NPC. In fact, I think there's a lot that could be done to increase the efficacy of what they do. I don't know if any of you have read the 2030 master plan, but it's not very good, and it costs millions of dollars to do. The complaints that I'm hearing about the NPC are from builders and developers who are complaining that the amount of time that it takes for their proposals, submissions, whatever, to return to them and get clearance, that's taking too long. Well, that is an aspect of what the NPC does, but it's not the main thing that the NPC does. The NPC is there to make sure that we don't make huge infrastructural mistakes. Okay, so that's the most important thing that they're there to do. I don't think they're doing a very good job of that. So as far as what we should do about the NPC, and that's one of my main issues, I think we need to get it worked out. We need to secure that thing. Somebody asked a question about that later.
Next question? Or, I'm sorry, has everyone responded to that one?
Yes.
Okay. Several of the cards that were handed up this evening have to do with litter. And I'd like to ask the candidates about litter, specifically about litter and not property standards, okay? Mayor Tyler has tied litter collection by nonprofit organizations to the receipt of city grant money, which I think is a novel concept, but it ties litter collection to volunteer efforts. And we've done our level best this year to sponsor cleanups, but we've had limited participation. And I'll take most of the blame for that because I don't think we've gotten the word out very well. But my point is this, we have a littered city, and volunteers can only do so much. So what would you do as a member of the city council to clean up our city?
I think that's a great question, and I'm all for the NIT programs that the government gives to neighborhood groups. I personally don't think there needs to be a stipulation to it. If we want to pick up the litter in our area, we'll pick up the litter in our area. But as far as citywide, it's deplorable, and I think you know that. You drive up and down Interstate 20. I did see a crew the other day. It looked like sheriffs had some inmates that were out cleaning up I-20. I personally would love to see more of that. I know some people think that's a little inhumane, but I think I'd rather be out in the sunshine doing that than sitting in a prison cell. I think that we do need to take some personal responsibility, but if we could get more crews like that, maybe from the city jail to help clean up, and I think that would go a long way.
Well, you know, I've been to a lot of cities in this country, and most of the ones that the people of the city love where they're from, they love their city, they think highly of it, they don't litter as much. Shreveport has a collective low self-esteem. And I think that that contributes very much to the decision to throw trash out the window of your car. We also have a lot of fast food. Of course, fast food comes neatly packaged in a little bundle of litter there. Well, where do you throw it? On the floorboard of your car? Most of us do that. Well, there's not very many trash cans. And the trash cans we do have are painted hunter green where you can't even notice it. I think that it's a really good idea to have bright yellow trash cans all over the place. That way, if people still litter, they don't have any excuse and they should be harshly punished.
The first solution to litter is just personal responsibility. If we want a clean city, then we all have to refrain from throwing trash on the ground. I suspect that everybody in this room abides that rule, but many of us in the community don't, and that needs to change. The second thing we need to do is punish noncompliance. If people are caught littering, they need to pay substantial fines that are sufficient to impose a financial pain that will make them think twice about doing it again. And thirdly, the city needs to devote employees and public resources sufficient to keep the city clean. It cannot offload the responsibility of picking up litter on neighborhood associations by requiring them to do that in exchange for funds. Thank you.
There's few city services that we depend upon more on a daily basis than our water supply, which is Cross Lake. Would you support an effort to develop Wallace Lake as an alternative water supply, and how would you finance that?
Absolutely, I would. I'm not too sure about the details of how it would be financed. I have a little bit of research to do on that. But I think that the water situation as far as the water supply, sewage, and drainage is extremely important and is understated as an issue in this election season. Folks, our water is not very clean or delicious. Sometimes you can turn on the faucet and smell it. It's not very good. Furthermore, the pipes are falling apart. I don't think that there's a bigger infrastructural issue that we have than our water. And that's why when I see a lot of stuff like the cross-buy development and these other things that are, in my opinion, frivolous spending and irresponsible to even consider when we still have homework to do on our water supply. I think that if there's any one thing that we do with infrastructure in the next 4 years, we need to get the ball rolling overall in our water supply.
Serving on the city council and in the mayor's office requires relying on the expertise of all kinds of people from different disciplines. If I were elected to the city council and the evidence presented to me indicated that Cross Lake was an insufficient water supply in the long term, then I certainly would consider developing Wallace Lake as an alternative source of water. I suspect, based on the enormous costs of maintaining our water and sewerage system, that developing an alternative source of water in that way would require a bond issue to finance. That would be a significant financial undertaking.
I'm going to be honest and say that I don't know a lot about this particular issue, but I will tell you this. If I'm on the city council, like Mr. Nicholson said, you talk to the people who do know about it. You get educated about it. I personally think that we have enough water where we are. I'm not familiar with the Wallace Lake situation, but I will refer that and defer that to people who are experts and engineers in that, and I'll gather my information from them. And if you'd like, I'll have an answer for you tomorrow within 24 hours on my Facebook page. How's that?
Okay, here's one for all the political animals in the audience. Have you ever changed political party affiliation? Would you give us your personal history there?
I have not. I'm a lifelong Republican. I registered when I was 18, and I've remained a member of the Republican Party since then.
I've been a registered voter for over 40 years. So yes, I have changed mine a few times. My first vote was for Ronald Reagan for president. I was a registered Republican. Then I did a crazy thing and I moved to California for 14 years. I became a Democrat. I thought Bill Clinton was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. And I voted for him. I switched my party to Democrat. And then another funny thing happened. I moved back to Shreveport and I started raising a family. And that will change your priorities as well. So I didn't go Republican. I think I either did independent or Republican, I'm not sure, because that pretty much was the basis of my values. When you raise a family, that puts a lot of things into perspective. So, you know, you go through your life and you do different things and you have different values. And let's face it, people all over the country are moving and switching their party affiliation. Parties aren't what they used to be. The Republican Party's not what it used to be. The Democratic Party's not what it used to be. Parties change and people change with it.
I've more or less always been an independent. I think I might have switched briefly to one party or another to vote in primary elections at the federal level, but I've always been a no-party person. If there is such thing as a common sense party, that's what party I'd be in, but there's not, so I guess I'll have to just keep being independent.
Okay, here's one. If your constituents oppose a project that City Hall is pushing, how will you respond? Second part of this, if you think a project that your constituents oppose is worthy, how do you get buy-in from the constituents? All right, this is a little bit tough here, but if your constituents oppose, let's leave it at this. If your constituents oppose a project that City Hall is pushing, how will you respond?
Great question. As a representative of District C, it will be my job to represent every single person in District C. Now, we know that people have differing opinions, but I think it's also important that if we could come together. I will tell you this one thing. You'll notice my push cards back there. They have my cell phone number on it. You'll be able to get a hold of me anytime you want to. And we can talk about any topic that is important to you. But I think if we have some kind of meeting where maybe I feel like something's good, and maybe y'all don't feel like something's good, let's sit down and talk about it. And at the end of the day, I'll respect my constituents because that's who I represent.
I'll always go with my constituents. I could care less what City Hall is pushing. City Hall works for the people, and if City Hall is trying to push something that's against the will of the people, then they're going to be hearing from me because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. If I think that they're trying to push anything that is crooked or some kind of rigmarole, I'm going to be the first one bringing it to the people so that they can have the details that they need to make a sound decision and to understand what exactly is going on down at City Hall.
I'm in my 14th year of practicing law. I'm a litigator, and so I have for many years served as an advocate for individuals, for families, for businesses. So I am well familiar with what it means to stand up to the government or to an adverse individual or business and represent my client's interest. If I'm elected to the city council, that's what I'll do. I will always do what I believe to be in the best interest of my constituents, the voters of District C, regardless of what other interests may be advanced by the mayor's office or anyone else.
Okay. This is something that Oliver Jenkins can speak to, I think. This questioner says, I currently have a big problem with a sewer line running through my backyard. How will you learn how the city works so that you can help your constituents?
How the city works is the fundamental thing that I'm interested in here. I have to go to work every day. I don't have the ability to sit down and learn about how the city works full time, but if I did, that's exactly what I do. And if elected, that's exactly what I will do. I want to read every inch of everything that's published by the city, and I want to understand what's going on in full from a technical perspective, from a political perspective, from a historical perspective, so that I'll be able to answer questions like that whenever the citizens have them.
If I have the privilege of serving as your councilman, I will educate myself about the city's inner workings by building relationships with the stakeholders. That means building relationships with other members of the city council, with the mayor, the chief administrative officer, and the other folks on the mayor's staff. That's the way things get done, and that's the way councilmen can learn on the job, which is something we all have to do when we take seats in public office for the first time. I don't hear this from my table tonight, but anyone who runs for public office, city council or otherwise, and tells you that they have all the answers or that they have everything figured out is mistaken or selling you a line of bull. I mean, this takes humility and diligence to learn the job and to get things right. That's what I'll do.
I don't know anything about water pipes. I'm going to tell you that right now. But as a representative of District C and as your representative, it is my job to be the bridge to the person who does know. So what you would do is talk to me. I will go to the department and I will arrange to come to your house with the head of that department, and we'll come to a resolution that is fair to you and is fair to the department and is fair to everyone involved. Because I can't come out there and look at your pipe and say this is what we need to do, but I will bring someone to your house who does know. And that would be the job of the city councilman, to be the bridge between you and downtown.
Okay, last question from the audience. We're going to have a census in 2020. Count all of our residents nationwide, including in our city. And if I'm thinking correctly, and this questioner is thinking correctly, we're going to be redrawing city council district lines after that census. Now, as anybody who follows politics knows, drawing district lines, whether they're from city council or United States House of Representatives, whatever it might be, is a process that involves incumbents as well as people on the outside. And frequently the criticism is the incumbents draw the lines to favor themselves and not necessarily the people. What is your attitude about drawing those lines, and will you participate in that process as a member of the council?
If we're going to move forward as a city, we have got to take into account the interests of the entire community, black and white, rich and poor, young and old. Of course, the moderator is correct that every redrawing of political boundaries is a potential opportunity to seek unfair advantage for incumbents and for political parties. If the lines are in fact redrawn after the 2020 census, I will seek to see that they are drawn in a way that is fair to the constituents of this district and is fair to the entire city. That's the right way to follow that process, to complete that process, and that's what I would support.
First of all, I think any councilman, incumbent or otherwise, who would make a decision like that based on what's best for him should never hold a city office. It's a privilege to serve the people of Shreveport. And If you're going to take an oath to do that, you do what is best for the people of Shreveport, not what is best for your political career. It's a shame that we have so many people who think that. Like John said, you draw out, I know that they have to be equal. There's a certain amount of people in the pie, we have to cut the pieces to be fair and even. Whatever works best for the city is what works best for everyone in the city.
I basically just think we need to get them drawn right and leave them there. When politicians use gerrymandering to try to give themselves an advantage, it's just monkey business. It's the kind of thing that makes people not have faith in the government. It's the kind of thing that makes people resentful of the government. It needs to end. I don't have any insight as to what calculus was used the last time that the lines got drawn, but the process, how do we even approach that? What's the right way to do it? That's a complicated question. So we're going to have to provide for the inherent complication that's there and to bring the people in to that process so that the people can decide what's right, set those lines and leave them there.
Okay, so we're going to head now into the closing statements, which are 2 minutes long. Before we get into that, I just want to thank everybody who...
I apologize for the interruption. Mr. Curtin gave me his word that he would address a concern of mine today at this meeting. I did submit a card, but it did not get asked. Surely the B&A can afford one more question so this gentleman can keep his word to me.
I'm sorry, sir, if your question is posed, you're
I
out
will
of
talk to
luck.
you after the meeting as long as you want to talk.
So you want to make sure that everybody doesn't hear what you have
Anybody
to
that
say?
wants to come and talk, I would be happy to.
Okay.
I'll stay as long as it takes.
Okay.
Thank you.
As I was saying, I want to thank everybody for handing up your questions. And I do want to let you know that we've got tables in the back of the room for the 3 candidates. And I encourage you to go see them as we wrap up and have a nice conversation. Ken, did you have a question?
Anderson Island has a mayoral forum a week from tonight, 6 o'clock, Street City Baptist. If it has a lot of people, you might want to get there early because it's a small church.
So, mayoral forum, Anderson Island, 1 week from tonight, Shreve City Baptist Church, 6 p.m. Very good, thank you. Okay, so closing statements by the 3 candidates, 2 minutes each. We'll start. Who was last on the questions? So we'll start with Mr. Curtin, then Mr. Nicholson, then Mr. Karstensen.
As important as it is for you to get to know who I am, I think it's equally important to know who I'm not. I am not running to establish a career in politics. I was inspired to offer my service for this one position, of City Council representative. I'm not here to advance my future. I'm here to advance our future and the future of our city. I'm not someone who claims to know all the answers. Before I announced my candidacy, I asked a lot of questions. I sought meetings with key officials. I got to know and I met the current city council members. I studied the budget and gathered data. And I seriously contemplated whether I would be a good candidate. Well, in short, what I did in those several months is exactly what I'm going to do as your city council. I listened. I've spent my entire professional life successfully building relationships. And we need somebody who can do that in a city council, in a job that requires, any passage of anything requires votes from 7 people who have a different mindset from each other. I'm your neighbor. I grew up here. I raised my kids here. I know people all over this district because I grew up around here. I just want you to know that you'll see my wife and I working in the yard. I mow the yard. Gary, that was for you. I mow my own yard. We love sitting outside on these beautiful Broadmoor nights, cooking out with our family. I want you to know, win or lose this election, I'm going to do it the right way. So at the end of it, I can hold my head high. And I want you to know that I appreciate every single one of you who came here tonight, and I hope that I have earned your support. Thank you.
Like Mr. Curtin, I appreciate all of you for your time and attention tonight. This is a job interview for a position in city government that involves the management of an operating budget of more than $488 million and a capital improvements budget that exceeds $877 million. The City Council's most important responsibility is ensuring that these enormous resources are used wisely and efficiently for the benefit of our entire community. We have to implement smart, solution-focused spending to solve the problems that have caused our city to lose almost 5% of its population in the last decade. Like Mr. Curtin, I am not running for City Council to establish myself as a political actor. I have no interest in this position other than doing what is right for this district and for this city. I was born and raised here. I went to St. Joseph's as a child, church and school. I had my first job when I was 14 years old at the Elks Lodge, and I've worked or been in school ever since. The only reason that I decided to enter this race and that I asked for your vote to be the city councilman for District C is that I am deeply concerned about the direction our city is moving, and I want this to be a place that my 4 children, when they grow up, can come home to and make a life. If we don't get smarter on crime, if we don't do the things we need to do to improve our economy, if we don't recommit ourselves to integrity in government, the city will not improve, and we will all suffer the consequences of that failure. I have spent the past decade as a lawyer and as a nonprofit board member serving this community. I believe my experience and education qualify me to serve in this position, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
I also am not running to further my political career. Don't care about a career in politics. I can't be bought. I have a very diplomatic personality. As an independent, I think that I would be very, very good at considering the interests of all the different opposing interests that are going on in the city and try to get to sensible conclusions. From Shreveport, I love the city. I've been all over the country. I've moved away and I've come back more than once. I've seen a lot of my friends who I grew up with move away and not come back, and I worry that others will move away. I want to prevent that from happening, and above all, I want people to feel safe in Shreveport and be proud to be from Shreveport. When people say, I'm from Shreveport, I want to see some pride in their eyes. And I think that in order to make that happen, we need some dramatic changes in local government, some dramatic social changes. And I think that I've got the energy and the personality to be able to make that happen. I'd like to have your vote on November the 6th. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to our 3 candidates. Appreciate them showing up. Takes courage to get out there and run for office, and you deserve the credit for that. Once again, we have tables in the back for the candidates. I want to thank y'all for letting me moderate tonight. And Rob Broussard's going to have the last word.
Again, I want to thank all the candidates for coming. Our neighborhood association has always had these forums and have always been informative, and surely this was too. But there's one more question. And if y'all remember, when y'all were here at the last meeting, I told y'all, and this is called the president's question, and I just invented that, by the way. And I told all of our candidates that when we have this forum, I wanted them to tell me one thing they were going to do for Broadmoor in the next year. Do y'all remember that? I said, tell me one thing. That's not a lot, just one. So, Joe, would you start that?
What am I going to do for Broadmoor? Well, Broadmoor is part of the city in general, so all the stuff that I do for the city will also be done for Broadmoor. Broadmoor in particular, I think that the people there need to see some personal reassurance. There's a lot of elderly people in Broadmoor, and I know this isn't a common political topic, but a lot of them are very unhappy and very lonely, and they feel left out and unwanted. And I think that it would be a very good thing to go around and to personally talk to them regularly and to try to soak up the wisdom that they have, because even if it's just a little thing to make people feel better in a personal way, I think it could make a big difference.
Thank you.
If I have the privilege of serving as your councilman, I will make sure that Broadmoor gets its fair share of our city's capital improvements dollars. If you look at the taxes that are collected from Broadmoor and the rest of District C and compare that to the proportionate share of capital improvements dollars we get, there is some work for District C to do that. My job as your city councilman is to serve as your advocate, and I will make sure that we get our fair portion of the resources that the city has to devote to the district.
As I mentioned earlier, one thing I feel is essential for a city councilman to do for his district. I hope you'll take one of my push cards, because in the bottom right-hand corner on the back is my cell phone number. I will be 100% accessible to every member of this audience. I take the word representative seriously. It means that I will be there for you to represent you and be accessible to you if you need help. I've had wonderful conversations with people all over this district when I've been out walking. I've listened to their concerns. And I think if you're going to be a good city council member, you need to listen and learn from your constituents. And I will be accessible to you 100%.
Thank you. And, before we close, Oliver's still here? Oliver, he just left. Well, I wanted to bring up that there was one thing I forgot when we started our program tonight, and that is, as we all know, Ackerd is now under construction, and it's going to be a lot of issues that are brought up as a result of that. One of them is that when they got to the intersection of Sandifer and Ackerd, they found that they had a reverse flow going in the sewage line. So, you know, it kind of delayed the project. And then when they started going west down Ackerd, they decided to move the main sewer line into the middle of the street. Okay, and I don't know if y'all understand what that means, but where the crown of the street goes like this, they're putting the sewer line right down the middle of the street. Guess what? It's the homeowner's responsibility to go from your house to the sewer main. But Oliver, I went down there and learned about sewers, you know, like you guys are talking about. And